Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's last session, Ask the Experts. I'm your host, Evelyn Mitchell, analyst at Insider Intelligence based in Virginia. And I'm joined by my colleagues, Susie David Canyon, principal analyst, joining us from New York City, Deborah Aho Williamson, principal analyst, who's repping the West Coast in Seattle, and our special guests today, Cora Moise, lead principal, retail customer success at BlueConic, based in Atlanta, my hometown, and Ali Hayeri, Vice President Marketing at Mountain, joining us from LA. So we got a good representation from all over the country. I'd like to thank BlueConic and Mountain for making today's live audience Q&A possible. Let us know where you're tuning in from. You can do that by using the chat window on the right of your video feed. And most importantly, make sure to ask us questions. That's why we're here today. So with that, let's get started. I'm going to begin by asking a few really great questions that we received during our keynote presentation earlier today. So this one is for Susie. Do opportunities exist for service providers to advertise on Amazon?
Oh my gosh, I'm the first one, so much pressure. I think it depends on how we think about service providers. So I'm gonna take that as like restaurants or travel agencies, travel services versus actual service providers in terms of B2B. And I think the answer is yes. I mean, I think it's a little bit different than if you're a brand because you still, Amazon doesn't sell your product. So I think the most important things to think about are, is there a strong cross-shop between your brand and the Amazon customer? So if there is, then that is a potential place. I think Amazon, as we all heard, their Q3 earnings were a little bit lackluster, especially in retail. And so they are using other revenue streams like advertising to bolster their profits. So this might be a great way. They might be a little bit more resistant because they don't want to have their customer move into another space. So you might have to think about doing it a little bit differently, like coupons or cashback or some sort of way of identifying your brand, but not sending your potential buyer onto your brand versus keeping them on Amazon. But otherwise, I don't see why it wouldn't work. Back to you.
Thank you. All right, this one is for Debbie. Is there any data, or do we have any data on the average price for purchases on social platforms?
Yeah, so that's a really, really good question. A bit hard to come by at this point. We do know that generally the most popular types of things to purchase on social commerce are things like fashion items, cosmetics, the product drops that you see, limited availability things. What I can tell you is that our research and our forecast is that overall, social buyers in the US will spend about $500 this year on all social commerce purchases. And we're expecting that to go up to about $800 per person in 2024. And just to kind of clarify that, that includes purchases both on platforms, so like directly through a platform's social commerce purchasing capability, and also things that are driven by links that go off the platform.
Excellent. I have another one for you if you're up for it. And this one might be a perspective question since we can't necessarily have future data on this one, but will Gen Z's attention span get longer as they age? And this is a direct quote. This lovely person said, "Please, for the love of everything holy." So what's your take on this?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah, I wish I had a good answer for that. I think my gut tells me, unfortunately, no, it's not going to get longer. Will it get shorter? I don't know. Is it possible that it gets shorter? I don't know. I mean, it's already so short. But I mean, I used to do research on multitasking years ago, or simultaneous media usage. And I think that is really the important thing to look at. Gen Z seems to have a abundant ability to multitask, to use simultaneously multiple types of media, their phone, their TV, their computer, all at once. I mean, I can say for personal experience, my daughter does this all the time and it horrifies me, but yet they thrive and they're able to keep up with their work and they know what they're doing. So even if their attention span is short, I think there's still opportunities to reach them. You just have to make sure you understand that they're in multiple environments and maybe think about spreading your message across all those different environments to make sure you catch them.
Excellent answer. All right. This one is for Quorum. With impending privacy changes, it's harder to recognize individuals across devices and channels, brands, you name it. So how does having first-party data enable you to deliver valuable experiences at the right time?
Yeah, thanks, Evelyn. This is a great question, and really happy to be here on this panel. I just wanted to lay a little bit of groundwork, actually, and just talk a little bit about the shift from third-party to first-party data, which is top of mind for almost all of us, and it's driven by a number of things that I'll just address real quick. Of course, there's Google's deprecation of third-party cookies, now slated to take place in the next year or so, as well as changes that Apple's made to their ecosystem in terms of how data is captured and shared across devices. But then there's this additional aspect that we all have to kind of be thinking about from a third-party data perspective, which is historically it's not been very well aligned in terms of consumer privacy in general. It ends up presenting several issues in terms of consent and compliance with privacy regulations like GDPR and CCPA. So, the shift from third-party data to first-party data is coming from several different directions, but it all ends up pointing in the direction of a much greater focus needs to be placed on your own first-party data across your own channels. Where BlueConic really kind of comes into help here is our customers want to be able to liberate their first-party data to get a clear understanding of individuals that have engaged with their brand. And with a privacy first approach, start creating a point of differentiation in terms of meaningful, valuable engagements that are beneficial for both the consumer and the business. So the last thing I'm just going to say here about how you gain the most value out of your first party data is being able to unify across online, offline, social, and so on and so forth, and being able to really recognize exactly who these individuals are and give them and serve up personalized engagements that move them through your conversion funnel. In the end, really, we just want to know who everyone is and make sure that we're meeting their needs. So transitioning folks from anonymous to known visitors becomes a huge critical piece of first party data.
Sounds like that'll be really useful also in connecting back to what Debbie just said about making sure that you have multi-screen presence for those individuals, particularly Gen Zers, who are all over the place with their media consumption, even at the same time. Awesome. All right, next one here is for Susie again. With Cyber 5 behind us, what are some last minute efforts that retailers or other brands can make to position themselves best to capture whatever is left of the consumer's wallet for this holiday season? I believe you are on mute, Susie.
Of course I'm on mute. It wouldn't be a webinar in 2022 if someone wasn't on mute. It's a really good question. It's one we get asked a lot. I think there are so many different dynamics at play. The holiday season this year has been very different from other years. Cyber 5 was really, really strong. We saw a big showing in stores and online. There was a lot of conversation around that being about inflation, and the growth was coming from inflation. But Adobe had some interesting numbers that there were so many promotions and so much value out there that actually, when you think about it, items sold at lower prices. So all the growth that came is really just for more things being bought and not for things being more expensive. So basically, retailers put everything on value messaging so that they could get rid of inventory and get to drive sales. So for the rest of the season, I think what's really important to remember is that this is one of the years where Christmas is on a Sunday. So that means that Friday, Saturday will be really, really, really big in-store, in-person shopping days. Retailers need to find ways to drive customers into the store. We know that mobile shopping was really big the last 5 days for Cyber 5. So really important to think about how to bridge that gap between online and in store. So whether it's like coupons that they get in their wallet on their mobile app that sends them to the store, whether it's making sure buy now, pay later was another really big hit during the Cyber 5 week. So making sure that you offer buy now, pay later in store and ensuring that your customers know that that's there. And like with everything else that comes to retail, right? Deliver the message to the person who is most likely to buy your item in a place where they are. So meet the customer where they are, make it very, very easy for them, make it as convenient as possible. So we are still seeing click and collect in all of its forms really gaining ground. And also just make sure that this year is very different, like we were saying about the economic pressures. Make sure that your value messaging is really clear so that it's not just about price, but it's this like equation of price quality. So just ensure that you're hitting your customer where they are with the right sort of pricing without giving away your store.
Awesome. Well, speaking of our unique economic situation this year, I have one for Ali. We are closing out the year with economic anxiety looming over marketing teams and really everyone. And so spending is being reined in, ad dollars are being, reallocated, and budgets are really, and all of the returns that those budgets create, it's all under the microscope right now. So Ali, how do you see advertisers navigating these challenges in 2023?
So it's a great question that's top of mind of a lot of my peers. One interesting thing was the recession of 2008 taught businesses something really important, which was, instinctively cutting advertising spend is the easiest and quickest thing that you can do if you're just trying to go lean. What a lot of research kind of showed us after the fact was that the companies that kept advertising, sustained that ability, they were the ones that really succeeded and kind of widened the gap from their competitors. And so when COVID hit, it was an interesting moment also because people took those findings from the recession into COVID, and you saw fewer advertisers reflexively cut advertising spend and more just kind of hit the accelerator, and they succeeded. There's a really quick rebound. We were anticipating a lot more hurt, but there's a really quick rebound that happened then. And so now that we're entering, or maybe in already, formally into a recession, it's been interesting to see how advertisers have been kind of responding to the moment. And at Mountain, we run a advertising platform, so we see firsthand what spending patterns look like. And this was one of our biggest Black Fridays and Cyber Mondays. I just learned the term Cyber Five. I want to use it just so I seem like I'm in the know. This was one of our biggest Cyber Fives that we've ever seen. And I think there, what you're noticing is that people have gotten the message. They've kind of learned the lesson, which is you got to just keep hitting the accelerator in a moment like this. And so I completely understand marketers that may be feeling a little bit of pressure, but I think they really need to kind of convey that message that now's not the time to cut. Now's the time to, at a minimum, sustain what's going on. And again, I can sort of validate that across the board. It seems like most advertisers are doing just that, if not increasing their spend.
Awesome. All right, this next one is about the ad-supported streaming market, which just got a few new faces. So I'll take a stab at this one first, and then anyone else feel free to chime in. So the question is, Netflix and Disney Plus are officially part of the ad-supported streaming landscape. Now what? And it's a broad question. It's a great question. And since both of these ad-supported tiers are still pretty fresh, Disney's launched yesterday, so very, very fresh here. We won't have solid subscriber numbers for a while, and neither platforms will have had their ad-supported tier in market for a full quarter come earnings season. But from a macro perspective, they're big names, but they're not stepping onto an empty field, right? Consumers have many streaming options, and we actually anticipate that more paid services will introduce free or lower cost ad-supported tiers to try and combat churn as consumers tighten their purse strings to weather inflation. And all that said, as my colleague Ross mentioned earlier in the keynote presentation, we forecast that streaming ad dollars will become less concentrated among the top 3 services, which would be Hulu, YouTube, and Roku. Ali, do you have anything to add on this question here?
Yeah, it's something that we think about a lot. Obviously, these make up a lot of our inventory sources, these ad-supported options. I think it's a net positive for advertisers. It's just going to represent a lot more inventory than what you're already seeing. With connected TV, even though we see like seismic growth of streaming television over traditional broadcast TV consumption, The important thing here is that it's still been relatively constrained when compared to other digital channels, the volume of inventory from other digital channels. But with the introduction of these two power players, Netflix and Disney, the gigantic audiences that they have, and of course Hulu already offering an ad-supported option, Peacock thriving, that's just a lot of inventory. It's good for advertisers. And what's specifically good about it for advertisers is hopefully it could bring the cost down a little bit, but also just as an ad unit, it's a very high completion rate. We see on our platform 98% plus completion rate on the ad units, something you don't see with like regular like video ads that you may run across the web. So it's an engaged audience, and TV is performant. The space that Mountain sort of carved out for itself has been in TV as a performance marketing channel. And so knowing that there's just going to be more and more inventory out there is only going to benefit performance marketers that are looking for new channels, because they're likely tapped out on all of the existing sort of greatest hits performance marketing channels are already using.
Awesome. All right. This one is for Coram. Considering your own focus in retail and CPG networks, or those verticals, what are you seeing as major trends in consumer behavior that offer brands in those verticals an opportunity to set themselves apart from their competition next year?
Yeah, sure, Evelyn. So, we all know that consumer behavior in general has evolved rapidly with constantly changing expectations. And even, to Ali's point, if we take it back to prior to the pandemic, omnichannel used to mean don't forget e-commerce. Then in the pandemic, it became only do e-commerce, right? And so, but now that, folks are back out and shopping in a physical brick and mortar store, we realize that the full omnichannel experience is absolutely important, to the point where customers don't necessarily care that it's omnichannel. They care that it's the brand channel, right? And the expectations truly are that it's going to be a consistent, personalized, engaging experience, no matter which channel they're engaging with. I'm just going to throw a couple of stats out there that I thought were kind of interesting. During the pandemic, 47% of retailers said that they'd seen an increased interest from new customers, right? Last year, there were 8,100 new store openings in the US announced. That's 2 times the amount of closings. So who would have thought that, coming right off of the pandemic? 59% of online shoppers who made a purchase made it directly from social commerce, which is back to Debbie's comment earlier. I mean, I've seen a stat that said it by 2028 that should grow to 3.4 trillion globally. So look, I think that consumer behavior in general is evolving very quickly, and channels are really kind of dissipating from an omni perspective to more of a brand perspective. And I think that when you think about the fact that 60% of consumers want to become repeat consumers once they've had a personalized experience, it all really kind of comes back to that original point of first-party data, really acknowledging everything that the consumer is telling us on our channels in order to get a refined view of that individual. But that comes with another layer, right? And I'll just take like 10 seconds to say this, is that there's also the opportunity for second-party data sharing or first-party data with your partners through things like data clean rooms. And that evolves also into things like retail media networks and being able to really learn from and activate with consumers that are really exactly where they need to be and where you should be presenting them the right messaging to kind of move them down the path. So there's quite a lot going on and tons of opportunity here.
Absolutely. And for those of you playing advertising and marketing bingo, data clean rooms, there's your center right there. And I have another bingo question for you about Be Real, and it's for Debbie here. Do you think Be Real is something marketers should experiment with?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to say if I happen to have dropped off a little while ago, well, you know, it has to happen to somebody on a webinar. So I'm back here using my phone data. Hopefully you can hear and see me. And I'm being real. So here we go. If only the prompt had come up right now, I could have taken everybody's picture and posted it. Now, Be Real is absolutely fascinating. I can't tell you right now if Be Real is going to survive in future form. They need to make a lot of changes to make the app more engaging and something that people use more than, say, once a day for a few minutes to check when their Be Real ping happens. But what I would say is the behavior that Be Real is driving is something that I do think marketers need to pay attention to. It's very real time. It's very in the moment. It's very raw and unique to basically to Be Real. And I think all of these things are things that marketers really need to pay attention to. Doing promotions on Be Real isn't easy. There are limitations. It's very much an early stage app that has a lot of those early stage app problems. But I would say try it, check it out. It's definitely something that I think we're going to be seeing more of this type of communication in 2023. And you don't want to get left behind.
Awesome. All right. I have another kind of CTV focused one. So I'll take a stab at high level and then anyone else feel free to chime in. With inventory expanding on various platforms and with ad supported tiers proliferating, is there a need to alter the creative for each platform more frequently? And by way of extension, does ad fatigue increase in this scenario? And it's a really great question. And I think something that needs to kind of help bring context to this is that that ad frequency capping cross-platform is really challenging. So it's not so much an issue of making sure that creative is varying within each platform. It's also a challenge of making sure that creative is varying across the entire creative or the entire streaming landscape, because consumers are fluent. They move across these platforms without really very much acknowledgement that they are changing platforms. And frequency capping is a huge challenge for advertisers in this fragmented landscape. But ultimately, yes, ad fatigue can happen, and it can happen not just in individual platforms, but across the landscape. And having really excellent creative that does not get stale is one way to help combat maybe some frustrations that might come up from the consumer end of things. Does anyone have anything to add?
Yeah, this is something that is really important to us. In fact, we're a technology platform, but we identified creative as being so important that we went out and made a couple of really important acquisitions purely on the creative side. We acquired Ryan Reynolds' creative agency, Maximum Effort, and a video production marketplace called QuickFrame for this exact reason. Absolutely agree. Ad fatigue is real. It's an interesting one because it's bad for both consumers and advertisers. I've seen some advertisers kind of say like, oh, well, I want my ad shown as much as possible. And it just never works out positively for them when they do that. Consumers just have this like growing contempt when every ad pod they see same ad, sometimes consecutively. Our research shows that creative should be at worst sort of cycled out on a quarterly basis, especially if you're advertising on TV aggressively. I mean, you're getting a lot of impressions. You really need to be mindful of how often the creative is shown. An interesting sort of tip for people has been, CTV is programmatic, and advertisers should take advantage of the fact that they can sort of run ads against really specific audiences. And so we've had success doing that. We use our own platform to market to marketers. And so we ran an ad where Ryan Reynolds was talking to marketers directly, because you have the space to do that in programmatic advertising. And so to that point of should you be thinking about creative on a platform by platform basis, I would think about creative on an audience by audience basis. Haram is mentioning first party data, which is crucial even in the case of connected TV advertising. Being able to show creative to an audience that already knows and loves you is valuable as well. That can drive conversions in a slightly different way. So however granular you can get with creating variations, it doesn't need to be crazy, but just variations of your creative on an audience by audience basis is absolutely going to serve everyone really well.
Awesome. All right, I have another one for Quorum here. The MarTech landscape is vast. Which aspects of these MarTech platforms and capabilities should companies prioritize in the new year, in 2023, to help transform customer relationships and create, a real competitive edge? And of course, then why would those capabilities be the top of your list?
Yeah, of course. And I just, I'll take 10 seconds to just talk or just respond to Ali's point there, and absolutely agree with him from the lens that first party data should absolutely be top of mind when you're thinking about tying it to programmatic delivery against audiences. Really, absolutely where the power lies in terms of liberating that data. From a MarTech perspective, if we're thinking about capabilities that we should be thinking about in 2023, look, we've all kind of seen that MarTech landscape chart with thousands of little logos. I think Scott Brinker puts this out every year. I think he's at HubSpot now, and we've all seen it. It's thousands of logos, and that thing gets uglier every year. So if you really think about it, we're all trying to make decisions on these capabilities that are often a little bit kind of niche solutions, but really we've started to gravitate to the second era or stage of MarTech, which is really more of an ecosystem play. And what we've started to find, and really is integral to our capability here, is integrations. Integrations are like oxygen to these capabilities, and to really let them run in a way that makes that helps drive as much value as possible. So when we're talking about programmatic video delivery or what have you, that we are able to quickly integrate into the systems that will provide the data to identify who these audiences are, as well as export or be able to integrate with those delivery mechanisms in order to activate against it. And then what you want to be able to do is test at a small scale, and then validate, and then essentially scale it up as quickly as possible. I was going to say flexibility here, and the ability to be able to do this kind of stuff without highly specialized skill sets is probably the second key piece here. In the past, I'll just give an example. In the past, a lot of our customers have needed to spend thousands of dollars and wait multiple weeks in order to get a segment or an audience from their agency, right? And by that time, the customer or the consumer has already moved on. That initiative has already passed. Those are the kinds of things that you should be able to do in a lot of the capabilities today. And if you're not finding that, then that's really what you should be pushing for. That's what BlueConic really kind of brings to the table, is the flexibility to have somebody that's not highly specialized go in, pull the data, create a segment, activate against it, whether on-site or offline, and learn from it, and let's scale.
Absolutely. And it sounds like, paired with the integrations aspect that you mentioned, that it can take a lot less time to do that, because without that manually having to bring insights from place to place to place, that can take a lot of time and effort. And without the specialized skills, it's rife with opportunities for human error. So absolutely sounds like we're headed for a really fascinating and exciting future here. All right, Susie, I have another one for you. 2023 is around the corner. I love how all these questions start with as if we have not talked about 2023 a million times today, but we have heard some of the bigger kind of all-encompassing trends throughout today. What are some of the ones that you are focusing on in retail specifically?
So this is one of my favorite questions. I can go on and on, but we do have our MTA on Tuesday. We just published a report on the 5 trends. There is something about retail media network. Obviously, there is something about social commerce. The one I think I'm going to talk to you all about, because I think maybe everybody else can chime in as well, is around, there's a path to profitability that is really changing now for brands. And it's not just for the digitally native brands, but it's also for, vertically integrated specialty store channel brands. Everybody has to think through how they're reaching their customer in a more profitable way, and think about the different commerce channels. And so what that means is we're seeing tried and true brands like Gap selling now on Amazon, and last year they tried on Walmart, different categories that they don't typically sell, but they're also now starting to sell their apparel wear. And we know that Amazon is a place where folks go to do their search. So really clear reason why they're going there. And then when we look at Peloton too had some difficulties, let's call it, this year, and so is looking for a way to boost their sales. And so they're partnering with Dick's, so traditionally brick and mortar store, as well as Amazon. So we're starting to see all these partnerships. And part of that is because distribution points are really important, right? You need to be where the customer is, and you need to find new people to buy you, right? So increasing your distribution points is really going to be critical in 2023 as consumers' loyalty wanes. We've talked about this at length, right? People are being a little bit more value driven. So you really, share of wallet and share of mind is really up for grabs. So we feel like 2023 is that inflection point for the way brands are thinking about selling directly to consumers, both as a business model, but also a sales strategy. And I could go on and on about this, but if you catch our webinar on Tuesday, you'll get much more about that. One of the trends we don't talk about during the webinar that's not in our report, but that I think is really critical for brands to think about for 2023 is everybody's going online, but also in store. And the store is not dead. I think everybody's heard me say that 1,000 times. It's like 80% of sales will still be in store by 2026. So I think consumers are going to expect even more when they go to store. They're going to want everything to be either more convenient, easier, faster, or they're going to want to be entertained. And so you're going to have to pick a lane. I don't think you can do both, and figure out how you can capture your customer in the right place at the right time so that they make a purchase from you. And I think, as a side note, not retail necessarily, but McDonald's is doing some fascinating things right now with smaller store formats to try and really bridge the gap between digital and online. They have an amazing app right now. Their loyalty program is booming. And so I feel like retailers often think about their own competition as brands that are similar to them, but you should look outside of that at adjacent industries to see what other people are doing.
Excellent advice, Susie. All right, and we have time for one last question here, and it's for Debbie. And it is yet another bingo question here. TikTok has had a really big year this year. That might even be an understatement. So what's next? What should advertisers pay attention to in this new TikTokified world that we live in?
Yes, so absolutely. I mean, it's been exciting. I mean, a few years ago when we first started covering TikTok, we honed in on the fact that Gen Z was moving on to this app, and we ought to pay attention. Same as how we did this with Instagram and Snapchat and Facebook before. My point here is that TikTok has a huge lock on Gen Z. It doesn't have a complete lock on Gen Z. It does need to watch its back to if you heard Jasmine's portion of the keynote this morning, platforms like Be Real and others that are attracting Gen Z for different reasons are going to steal some time away from what they're doing on TikTok. Definitely need to pay attention to that as an advertiser. But the other thing I think advertisers need to keep in mind is that TikTok is under a lot of regulatory and government scrutiny. I don't have time to get into all of it, but I'm sure that everybody has heard about it. Nothing has been decided yet, but I do think advertisers, I mean, if you've got all of your eggs or many of your eggs in the TikTok basket, you do need to be prepared for what happens if something happens and this platform is changed in some way in the United States. It may or may not happen, but you should be prepared. And that's my biggest takeaway going into 2023, because something is going to happen on the regulatory front. I don't know what it is, but something is going to happen and you need to be prepared.
Wow. It's a great, excellent note to end on. Always be prepared. And this was wonderful, but unfortunately, that is all we have time for today. And that's a wrap on our very first virtual summit. Thanks again to Susie and Debbie for joining us, and a very special thanks to Coram from BlueConic and to Ali from Mountain. There are some great resources from below from both BlueConic and Mountain. You can find them by scrolling down on the video page just below the video. And our eMarketer production crew, of course, they are all behind the scenes, and they deserve a massive massive thank you for making all of this possible today. We quite literally could not do it without them. I want to remind you all that all of today's sessions, minus the networking mixer, are already available on demand, so you can watch them again if you are so inclined, or share them with your colleagues. And you'll also receive a quick survey in your email today where you can share your feedback about your experience. And we truly appreciate any comments you're willing to share with us, and we will make sure to use them to make our future summits even better. And also, look out in January for our roundup report from this event, and it'll feature the biggest takeaways from everything that you've heard today. And then finally, our next Attention Summit will take place on March 3rd, 2023, and will feature a very special keynote on retail media networks. We'll be sharing information on that in the new year. And that's it. Thank you all so much for joining us today for our first live virtual summit. Have a great weekend and a wonderful holiday season.